Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The corridors of the Magical Academy felt like they were buzzing with invisible currents, the hum of enchantments woven into the stone itself. Lin Yuxin had always been attuned to the subtle thrum of magic that pulsed through the ancient halls, but tonight it felt different. It wasn't the typical rhythmic, harmonious magic she was used to. No, this was dissonant, dark, almost beckoning. It sent a shiver down her spine as she descended into the lower levels of the academy with a small group of her friends. The forbidden basement, where most students never ventured, was shrouded in both mystery and legend. It was whispered that dangerous magical artifacts, those too perilous for ordinary wizards to touch, were sealed beneath the academy's foundation. As she reached the old, creaky door at the end of the spiral staircase, Yuxin's heart pounded in her chest. A thrill coursed through her veins. "Yuxin, are you sure this is a good idea?" Jianhua, her closest friend, asked, his voice filled with hesitation. He was always the voice of reason in their group, cautious to a fault. Lin Yuxin flashed him a grin, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "Of course it's a good idea. We've been studying basic magic for 3 years now. Don't you want to see what real power looks like?" Her friends exchanged uneasy glances, but none of them spoke up. They had always been drawn to Yuxin's hot confidence, her hunger for knowledge that pushed her to break boundaries. The door groaned as it swung open under her touch. A blast of cool air greeted them, thick with the scent of ancient parchment and dust. Inside, the basement was darker than they had anticipated. The walls lined with shelves that held old, forgotten magical texts and relics. The room seemed to stretch endlessly into the shadows, illuminated only by the faint light of their wand. "Let's make this quick," Jianhua muttered, keeping his gaze firmly on the ground as they moved forward. Yuxin Sayla's fingers itched with the urge to explore. Her gaze drifted to a heavy ornate pedestal in the center of the room, and there it was, a book. But this wasn't just any book. Its cover was made of dark leather, its spine adorned with runes that glowed faintly in the dim light. She approached it, her steps cautious yet deliberate. "This must be it," she whispered to herself, a flicker of realization sparking in her mind. This was the forbidden book, the one she had read about in hushed rumor. It was said to contain spells so dangerous, so powerful, that even the most skilled wizards dared not speak their name. Her friends stood back, watching her warily as she extended her hand toward the book. The runes flared, brightening for a moment, as if acknowledging her presence. She hesitated, her heart thundering in her chest. Then, without thinking any further, she touched the cover. A sudden jolt of energy shot up her arm, knocking her back. She gasped, scrambling to her feet, but the damage was done. The runes flickered violently before fading into darkness. The book opened itself with a loud, hollow sound, the pages flipping rapidly as if by an unseen wind. The air in the room thickened, a chill settling over them. A low, menacing voice echoed from the depths of the book. "Finally, I am free." Yuxin's breath caught in her throat as a shadowy figure began to rise from the pages, a swirling mass of darkness that twisted and writhed like a living entity. Her friends screamed, stumbling backward as the spirit took form before their eyes. It was tall, its face obscured by the shifting shadows, but its presence was overwhelming. A deep malevolence radiated from it, seeping into the very air they breathed. "What did you do?" Jianhua shouted, his voice breaking with panic. Yuxin could barely find the words to answer. Her hand shook as she gripped her wand tightly. I didn't. The spirit hovered above them, its eyes, if they could be called eyes, glowing with a cold, unnatural light. "For centuries I have waited for this moment," it hissed, its voice like the rustling of dead. "Leave. You have released me, child, and now you must pay the price." With a single sweep of its hand, the spirit sent a wave of dark magic surging toward them. Yuxin threw up a shield spell instinctively, the force of the impact knocking her backward into one of the shelves. Her friends scattered, running for the door, but Yuxin knew it was too late. The spirit had already tasted freedom, and it wasn't going to let them leave so easily. Ren Yuxin screamed at her friends, her voice hoarse with fear. "Get out of here." Jiandeva hesitated for only a moment before grabbing the others and dragging them toward the staircase. Yuxin watched them go, her heart racing, but she couldn't remove. Her gaze was locked on the spirit, who now turned its full attention toward her. "You are the one who opened the book," it said, its voice dripping with malice. "You will be the one to bear the consequences." Before she could react, the spirit lunged at her, its shadowy form. Cold seeped into her bones, and for a moment, Yuxin felt as if her very soul was being pulled from her body. But just as quickly as the sensation came, it was gone. The spirit withdrew, hovering above her once more. Yuxin gasped for air, her body trembling uncontrollably. "What do you want?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The spirit tilted its head, its glowing eyes narrowing. "I seek what I was denied long ago, immortality. And now that I am free, I will reclaim my power and plunge this world into darkness." Yuxin's soul heart sank. She had heard stories of spirits like this, ancient sorcerers who had delved too deeply into forbidden magic, seeking eternal light. Their greed had cursed them, turning them into twisted, malevolent beings. But none of those stories had prepared her for the reality of standing before one. "You will help me," the spirit continued, "or I will consume you and everyone you hold dear." Yuxin's mind raced. She had to find a way to stop this, to undo what she had done. But how? She was just a student, a reckless one at that. What could she possibly do against a being of such immense power? As the spirit began to dissipate into the air, its voice lingered in the room. "You cannot escape me, child. I am bound to you now, and soon you will understand the true cost of your action." The shadows retreated, leaving the room deathly silent. Yuxin collapsed to the floor, her chest heaving as she tried to process what had just happened. She had released an ancient evil, a spirit that sought to destroy everything, and it was her fault. She had no choice now. She had to fix this. Lin Yuxin staggered to her feet, her body still trembling from the encounter. Her mind was racing. She had to act fast. The spirit had been released because of her mistake, and now it was bound to her. The consequences were clear if she didn't find a way to stop it. The entire academy, maybe even the world beyond it, would be at risk. She couldn't allow that to happen. She hurried out of the basement, her footsteps echoing in the dark, empty halls as she ascended the staircase. Her friends were nowhere in sight, likely fleeing as far as possible from the chaos she had unleashed. Good. She didn't want them involved any more than they already were. As she made her way through the labyrinthine corridors of the academy, Yuxin's thoughts were a whirlwind. How could she stop a spirit as powerful as this one? She'd read about ancient beings like it in her studies, but the information was always vague, incomplete. What she needed now was real knowledge, a way to reverse the spell and seal the spirit back into the book. But where would she even begin? The library. It was the only place that held the kind of obscure, dangerous knowledge she sought. But it was also highly restricted. Only senior students and professors had access to the forbidden sections, where the darkest and most powerful texts were kept. She would have to sneak in. The consequences of getting caught were severe expulsion, possibly even imprisonment. But at this point, that seemed like a minor issue compared to the danger at hand. Yuxin made her way across the courtyard, the cold night air stinging her face. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that danced eerily on the cobblestone path. Her pulse quickened as she neared the grand doors of the library, her eyes darting to the guards posted at the entrance. They were supposed to protect the library from students, like her, those too eager to tamper with forces beyond their control. She'd have to find another way in. Circling around the building, Yuxin spotted a narrow window near the back, partially obscured by ivy. It was small, barely wide enough to squeeze through, but it would have to do. With a grunt, she pulled herself up and wriggled through the opening, her robes catching on the edges as she tumbled onto the cold stone floor inside. The library was massive, its towering shelves packed with dusty tomes and scrolls. The air smelled of parchment and ink, and the faint flicker of candlelight cast shadows that seemed to whisper secret. Yuxin's heart raced as she scanned the shelves, her eyes narrowing on a section roped off with a heavy chain that had to be at the forbidden section. She glanced around, her breath catching in her throat when she heard footsteps echoing through the aisle. She pressed herself against the wall, her wand clutched tightly in her hand. A librarian was making their rounds, their long robes sweeping the floor as they moved past. Yuxin held her breath, waiting for the sound to fade before she dashed forward. With a whispered incantation, she loosened the chains and slipped into the restricted section. The books here were different. Their covers worn and cracked with age, the titles scrawled in ancient, nearly forgotten languages. She scanned the shelves quickly, her fingers brushing over the spines as she searched for anything that might help her. Time was running out. Then she saw it, a large dusty tome titled The Sealing Arts of the Ancient. Her heart leaped. This had to be it. She pulled the book from the shelf, the weight of it making her arms tremble. Flipping it open, she scanned the pages frantically, her eyes darting over diagrams of binding spells and complex sigils. But as she read further, her stomach twisted with dread. The ritual to seal a spirit as powerful as the one she had unleashed required immense magical power. More than that, it demanded a personal sacrifice, a deep, irreversible one. She'd have to sever her connection to magic entirely to contain the spirit. Yuxin swallowed hard, her throat tight. Magic was everything to her. It was the reason she had come to the academy, the reason she had pushed herself beyond limits, seeking knowledge no one else dared to pursue without it. Who would she be? But there was no other way. She closed the book, the weight of her decision settling over her like a suffocating blanket. Her mind raced with images of the spirit growing stronger, spreading its darkness throughout the academy, corrupting everything it touched. She couldn't let that happen. Not to her friends, not to the academy she loved, even if it meant losing everything she had worked for. Yuxin made her way back to the basement, the book clutched tightly in her hand. As she entered the room, she could feel the spirit's side presence even before it fully manifested. The air grew colder, thicker, as if reality itself was bending around the ancient forest. Shadows coalesced, swirling in the air before her as the spirit's dark form took shape once more. "You returned, child," it hissed, its voice like the scraping of rusted metal. "Have you come to submit to me, to accept my offer of power?" Yuxin, as grip on the book tightened, her jaw clenched. "Number? I've come to stop you." The spirit laughed, a hollow, echoing sound that sent shivers down her spine. "You stop me. You are nothing. A mere child playing with forces you cannot hope to understand." Yuxin raised her wand, her heart pounding in her chest. "Maybe I don't understand it all, but I know enough, and I know how to seal you away." The spirit's eyes, those glowing, malevolent orbs, narrowed, its form shifting in the air like smoke. "You would dare?" Yuxin didn't respond. She began chanting the incantation from the book, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her inside. The spirit roared in fury, lashing out with tendrils of darkness that slammed into her shield. Yuxin staggered, the force of the impact nearly knocking her off her feet, but she held her ground. "You cannot stop me," the spirit bellowed, its voice filling the chamber. "You are weak." Sweat dripped down Yuxin's brow as she focused on the spell, drawing on every ounce of magic she had. The room shook, the walls cracking as the spirit's power clashed with her own. But slowly, ever so slowly, the dark tendrils began to retract, drawn back toward the book. The spirit howled, its form twisting and contorting as the binding spell took hold. But the final part of the ritual, the sacrifice, still remained. Yuxin hesitated for only a moment, her chest tight with fear and sorrow. She had no choice. Taking a deep breath, she whispered the final words of the incantation, severing her connection to magic. The effect was immediate. A surge of energy left her body, and for a moment she felt utterly weightless, as if her very soul was slipping away. The spirit screeched one last time as it was pulled back into the forbidden book, its form dissolving into nothingness. And then there was silence. Yuxin collapsed to the floor, her body trembling with exhaustion. The room was still, the oppressive darkness gone. She had done it. She had sealed the spirit, but at a cost she could never recover. The sense of loss was overwhelming. Her magic, her lifeblood was gone. She didn't know how long she lay there, staring at the now closed book before Jian and the others found her. He knelt beside her, his face pale with worry. "Yuxin, what did you do?" She looked up at him, her vision blurry with tears. "I did what I had to.